So I think if we want to get tangible about this, by the way, thank you for running through the complex thing. I think that is, first of all, I think it's interesting, and I think it's also useful to have that in your mind as a framework as we talk about some of the actions or practical things. Kind of know what's going on behind the curtain. Like, this is probably running all the time. Let's talk about some practical things to do. I think one of the things that I'm tuning into right now is really paying attention to that self-talk.
Mm-hmm.
Like joining in that dialogue. I think most of it's automatic for us. We could be way more mindful of that. Okay, what is the actual conversation in my head? And now some people, I would report, I don't have a lot of conversations in my head. I mean, I do, but they're more like impressions and feelings and kind of this, it's less a really explicit conversation. It's more like I might imagine like a performative element or a little scene, like a little movie scene that's going and I'm acting something out. Like my self-talk and dialogue is different than just digital words back and forth. And I would guess that a lot of people have dialogue, like self-talk dialogue in maybe fragments. It's not as clear as it may be to you. Somebody uses like accuracy, introverted thinking. I know my mom she's an INFJ and she does a lot of like, she'll be like in the grocery store, like talking to herself, like, what do I need for dinner today? Like she'll like have this like actually out loud to herself. She'll be talking to herself. So I think it's very indicative of introverted thinking or accuracy.
It's super weird to me that people don't.
Yeah.
When I found out that not everybody has constant dialogue going on in their head, I was like, really? Well, how do they do anything?
I start talking to myself as soon as I know there's an audience.
Right.
Like as soon as somebody else comes in the aisle, I start talking to myself, but it's not for me.
Yeah.
It's to perform.
Yeah.
So it's all performative for
Right.
me. I don't think I have that dialogue in the same way. Now, clearly something's going on there. I am having some inner dialogue or some inner conversation, I'll call it. Maybe it's not clear dialogue, but something is going back and forth with two elements of me or multiple elements of me. But it's more emotional, it's more performative, and it's definitely not conversational. But I would think that's a very good practical step, is just pay attention. When you have that self-talk, maybe you can write some phrases down, like I'm terrible at this, or I'll bomb terribly if I get on that stage. Or even if you're assessing yourself, like you're watching something that you wish you could do, and the self-talk comes in like, oh, I wish I could give a talk like that I see on that video. Oh, I'd never be good at that. Oh, wait, I can catch that. Write it down. I'll never be good at that. That's good to catch those moments of self-talk where you're limiting yourself.
Yeah.
Okay. So that's, I think, just kind of a baseline, I would argue, for self-appraisal.
Yeah. Well, and paying attention to the way you're talking to yourself, especially if you're talking to yourself in a way that you wouldn't talk to anybody else.
Yeah.
Right. Like if you're saying things to yourself that are, if you said them to anyone else, they would be considered undermining or deeply disrespectful. Pay attention to that kind of self-talk for sure.
Yeah.
And then trace it back to, I mean, I know that we just did an overview of Jungian complexes, and most of that work is done with actually analysts and maybe psychiatrists or psychologists or therapists that are aware of it. I'm not saying that and use your self-talk to dive into all of your deep Jungian complexes, but kind of source it back and go, well, what exactly is going on for me? When I tell myself nothing's going to work out in all the variety of ways that I say that, and I've used this example a couple different times, but I think it's a good one. Is it because I'm trying to avoid disappointment? Okay, that's interesting. Why am I trying to avoid disappointment? It's probably because you have a lot of unprocessed disappointment inside, right? Like when we have had too much of something, we can't handle any more.
It's like a bruise or a wound on your body.
Yeah.
You need to protect it.
Yeah, it's like the emotional version of the straw that broke the camel's back. It's like, I can't have one more little bit of this because that'll be a bridge too far. It'll send me over the moon. So if you can't handle a specific emotion, it might be because you have too much of that backlogged to process already. So if you are setting up your life or setting up your self-talk in order to avoid certain emotions, like go, well, maybe I have some unprocessed, business here.
Yeah.
And then figure out methodologies to process emotions, particularly ones that you're not a big fan of, right? Disappointment is a hard one for a lot of people. Mine's anxiety. I'll do just about anything to not feel anxious. But that means that I have certain appraisals of myself that prevent me from being in situations that will create anxiety. So I have to recognize, well, then that means that part of me is being disowned. And that means that I have a schism. And that means that I'm going to have a coping mechanism. So how much of your talk is a coping mechanism to avoid things that are, that feel like they'll just add to a backlog of unprocessed material?
Okay, I have one of these that's come up recently, just to workshop this for a second. So it actually being aware of it now made it worse. now I'm like reinforcing it.
Right.
So that's
never mind. Don't be self-aware.
Well, but what I mean is there must be more here. That's
Yeah.
what I'm saying, because ENFP preferences. I have effectiveness, extroverted thinking as a 10-year-old or tertiary process. And so I might be on a timeline of getting things done. And I noticed, I had this awareness in the last few months that the moment a time clock is introduced to a situation, like I'm pretty good at this function. Like, of course, I think I'm better at than I am because everybody does. Me too. But I have a lot of capacity here. I've spent a lot of time here. So I'm uncertain. I'm not as good as I think I am, but I do have capacity. Like I know how to do marketing and build business and get stuff done and manage a calendar and resource and pay my bills on time. Like I can do a lot with it. That's basic stuff. And I can do some a little bit more advanced things with it until you introduce a time clock. And I used to hate this in school. The moment a test was timed, it's somebody takes an eraser and just wipes my brain or sends a signal and scrambles the signal. The moment I have a ticking time behind me, I get anxious. I can't think clear. I don't know if it's going to be okay. Like even arbitrary time.
So don't hire you for the bomb squad.
Yeah. Just disrupts my entire thing. Now, if it's just one thing, like it's an emergency like that, I probably could, because I have to just focus on one thing. It's when it's like I'm managing multiple things going on at the same time. That's like really hard. Or a test. How competent are you? I guess those are two things. So this came up where I found that out about myself, identified that was driving me. And now I have that, like we'll be here and like, we'll have like our daughter's got to go to an appointment or something. And we're trying to finish up a podcast and I'm reminded of the time and I'm like, oh, that's right. I don't do well when the time clock's introduced. And I say that to myself because I know that was what was happening. And then I just buy what I said to myself. I'm like, well, I can't do it with a time clock introduced. And then I get all frustrated and nothing's really changed except now you know it. Like it's all out in the open, but it's still the same problem or the same challenge.
Mm-hmm.
I haven't actually corrected for it, but I have paid attention to my self-talk and now I know what is causing the distress.
Yeah.
So that's probably like a first step to I'm appraising, my self-appraisal is if I get to that situation or that situation is going to have a time clock on it, self-appraisal, I'm probably going to have a very challenging time. I might fall apart. It might be really tough on me. Now, again, I'm a little bit hyperbolically amping this up. I don't think it's as...
A little bit.
Well, in our events, we're under a high time pressure and I do pretty good there.
Oh, you do beautifully there.
So I don't think it's in all circumstances, but in a lot of ways it is. Yeah. So...
No, when you're in a flow state, you're smooth.
Fair enough.
You're smooth criminal.
Anyway, I just wanted to introduce that to say sometimes, we're paying attention to like our appraisal, our self-talk. I don't mean to throw us off track, but I just realized that comes up for me like, now I'm reinforcing the thing.
Well, and I think that's a good point and why you don't stop with just be aware.
Exactly.
Like you can't just be aware because like you said, sometimes just being aware actually exacerbates it because now it's a thing. Right now it's like, oh God. And then the anxiety isn't just the subject. The anxiety is your awareness of how you're responding to the subject. So now it's compounded, right? Now you've got like 2 layers of anxiety going on or 2 layers of whatever going on. And so that's why the important thing is to source it back to whatever's unprocessed.
Yeah.
And it's almost like plaque that builds up, I think sometimes, right? Like our unprocessed material can end up becoming it's heavy, right? It feels like a X-ray vest sitting on us and we just can't take any more weight. And so when something that isn't that heavy gets added to us, it's just too much. And people will look at you and be like, that's not that big of a deal. That's not that heavy, but they're not recognizing all of the weight that you're already carrying underneath it.
Yeah. Because
that's all personal. It's all baggage from, something from the past or something that just needs attention. So, and not to workshop your situation or, the experience you have with the time clock, but there is unprocessed material around that.
Yes.
And so I don't know if it's memories. I don't know if it's experiences that you haven't fully processed. I don't know if it's beliefs. I don't know if it's feelings. I don't even know if it's or patterns or interpretations or wishes. But I do know it's unprocessed.
Yeah.
Because in those moments you can't control your response. And so, then whenever we have choice removed from us, whenever we don't have the ability to make a decision of how we're going to show up, it goes into autopilot.
Yeah.
We have to, and especially if it's if it's something that's not serving us, we have to imagine that there is a part of us that needs attention. And so what's nice about self-appraisal is it gives us an opportunity to hear ourselves talk to ourselves, or to show up in those ways, or to, to observe our behaviors or our self-talk. And then here's the important thing, in a quiet moment, right? It's the important thing because, one, if we try to figure it out while we're still all spun up and heated, we're not going to get anywhere, right? It's just the thing has already gripped us, so it's just going to keep gripping us, and all it'll do is rationalize itself, and we won't get any further. So we wait until a quiet moment. And the second reason why that's important is we tend to forget after the moment is over. So we go, oh, I don't know what that was, and then we just move on. But when things aren't spun up, when they aren't in the depths of despair, or whatever it is that is going on for us, that is the best time to do actual, real, legit self-appraisal, and to figure out what's actually happening with us. But we almost always, it's like, well, no, this is a good moment. Why would I want to spend my off time doing self-work? And so paying attention to those things, and then somehow having a mechanism of noting, right? Like writing it down, or asking somebody that's there, like, can you remind me? And maybe even having a mnemonic, like one word, like, can you just remind me to think about time clock later, or whatever. Yeah. And so in a time period where you're more resourced, then you can go find out whatever is the unprocessed material.
One of the challenges that, like, when that example I gave about the time clock, I think one of the big things is I believe it. Mm-hmm. Like, it's hard not to believe it, that it disrupts me and it scrambles my brain. And the more I call it and I label it and I'm aware of it and I'm appraising it, like, it's kind of reinforcing it. So I need to kind of, now that I have made it aware, I need to kind of, well, it's very subjective, I guess. It's a very subjective experience for me. I think I need to, maybe not everybody would need to do this, but I need to, like, disengage from the self-talk for a moment around this. Now that I've identified it, it's like, now not keep bringing up into my consciousness and reinforcing it. Yeah. So I think that's a big thing, is it's not going to be a one size fits all. As we appraise ourselves, as we're doing self-awareness, it's going to be very unique to you listening or watching, based on how you're, like, just your general wiring as a person, your circumstances, all that, and then also your personality type. Mm-hmm. Those are going to influence how you experience this of the self.
I think that's a really important point, actually, that it's subjective. Like, your self-talk or your self-appraisal it's not like your inner voice. It's not like it's representing reality or the universe.
It's God himself speaking to you.
Like, I'm going to bomb this talk is not like God telling you, or the universe telling you that you're going to bomb the talk or whatever. So I think that's a really important thing to remember, is that it's subjective. And because it's subjective, it's subject to change. Like, we can change our self-appraisal. We can change our self-talk. We can change how we experience ourselves. And I'm not necessarily advocating for always having an opposite response, that all of your self-talk or self-appraisal will be positive, because that wouldn't be realistic either. Yeah. What you're really looking for is, you're looking for modesty. You're looking for, an accurate self-assessment. And I think it's perfectly valid to have a self-talk that is less like, I'm going to bomb this talk, or this speech or presentation or whatever, and to instead say something like, I'm feeling scared in this moment, but I'm going to do it anyway. Right? Like, or like, I'm uncertain about how this presentation is going to go.
It's more accurate. Mm-hmm. It's more precise. Yeah. What's really going on for you.
Yeah. I'm nervous. I don't feel as confident in this moment as I oftentimes do, but I'm going to try it anyway. Yeah. That's a totally reasonable self-appraisal.
That's right? Like E-priming it.
Yes. Right. Yeah. Yeah.
We don't have time to talk about E-prime.
But define it quickly.
Well, I don't know if I can define it, but basically look this up on Wikipedia, E-prime. It's basically creating a very, it's removing, I don't remember. Anyway, the point is, it's radical subjectivity. You're basically putting it from it's like, that movie was terrible. I thought that movie was terrible. Right. You're just framing. I can't remember the exact definition. I'll have to look it up.
All right. Sorry.
No, I can't remember.
I didn't mean to throw a definition in your direction.
Pull out some information and definitions that's not your strong suit right now, live on air. Go.
And I'm gonna grab a stopwatch.
Okay. Yes. Grab a stopwatch and time me doing it. Like, brain gridlocks.
Yeah.
All right.
Yeah.
So,
but that is it. It's like rewording things to make them as subjective as they actually are, and removing the objectivity. Like, that movie sucks. That's an objective statement that actually isn't actually, that's not actually true.
Yeah.
I think that movie sucks is a subjective statement and goes to E prime.
Yeah.
So turning things more personal and making it so that, yeah, like you just said, which is, like kind of trying to call the situation as close to how it actually is being experienced and not laying on all this interpretation of what it means. Right. And then, and being okay with not always, hitting straight A's or the center of the bullseye or whatever. It's like kind of, it's okay to self-appraise with, as I mentioned, with modesty, and to be okay with things being a little, imperfect.
Yeah.
Like, it's okay. It's all right. Yeah. Like, I'm going to bomb this presentation isn't helpful. I feel nervous. I'm not as confident in this presentation, but I'm going to do it anyway. It's totally fine with at the end was like, yeah, no, I bombed that. Because that's going to happen sometimes and be like, yeah, I was nervous and I guess I had a right to be because I didn't do very well, is better than I'm going to bomb this presentation and then later on wondering if you talked yourself into bombing it.
Yeah.
Right. And then at that point, when you're self-assessing in retrospect, as opposed to future projection, you go, okay, I didn't do that great. I bombed it. Maybe next time I can be more prepared or and work through all the feelings of it. Okay. I am experiencing humiliation. I'm experiencing maybe even some shame. I'm experiencing fear that bombing the presentation, what it might mean for my career. Like I'm experiencing all this stuff and sitting with it and getting to the other side, as opposed to shutting it down, locking it away, having even more disowned stuff, creating a complex around it or whatever. Like just being with the experience, getting to the other side, realizing you survived, and then getting a sense of, well, what can I do now to not bomb my next presentation?
Yeah.
Right. Like, what do I got to do? And this is actually a more empowered place, because you're going to watch yourself improve over time, as opposed to feeling like you're cursed or whatever it is that your self-appraisal then manifests in order to justify why these things aren't going right.